Hi, my name's Keith Whittier, and welcome to Let's Talk Racism. Whether this is your first episode or you've seen all of the ones that have come before, I truly appreciate you taking the time to check this out. Today we're going to be speaking with Clarissa, a wonderful person that I've known for many years. We're going to touch on subjects such as George Floyd and overall racism, but we're also going to talk about some of her personal experiences as somebody who's biracial. It's a very interesting conversation, and it's coming at you right now. Ladies and gentlemen, this is episode 9. Ladies and gentlemen, the conversation continues, and I'm very excited to be joined today by my friend Clarissa. Clarissa, how are you doing today?
I'm good, thank you.
Excellent. Thanks so much for taking the time to chat with me. I thought, you're like me, somebody who's very vocal about things that are going on right now, and I thought it was important to have you on just to get your perspective. So I'm looking forward to
Absolutely.
talking with you today.
Me
Um,
too.
Now, for first of all, as I've been asking all my guests, we're in the midst of this pandemic right now. How are you and yours doing?
Yeah, thank you. On a whole, I think we're doing okay. I think for everyone, especially in the beginning, it was a lot to digest and adjust to, right?
Hmm.
But one of the things that I practice constantly is gratitude and being mindful. And so for me, what has really helped is to put things into perspective, right? I mean, the situation that we're in right now, people have to wear masks, you can't be in large groups, some things are shut down. But I also can put into perspective that around the world there's a lot of bigger issues going on. So if we can all do our small little part, I think we'll be okay. And luckily, um, my job, I am able to work from home, so that's been good too. It's been a bit of a race since March,
Hmm.
but we're settling in, so we're okay.
Good, good. I'm glad to hear
Mhm.
it.
Yeah,
Now, I would love to be talking about so many different things
I
today, but
know.
but with everything that's been going on in the news, I mean, this is something that I feel that needs to be addressed and needs to be discussed.
Yeah.
I feel that even though it wasn't the first situation, this George Floyd incident has really galvanized such a large movement globally, where people are having conversations about race, whereas otherwise they might
Yeah.
not have been, and
Hmm.
people who might not have been getting involved are getting involved. um, I know we're several weeks removed from the situation, from the actual
Hmm.
incident, but I mean it's still very prevalent in our minds. Tell me,
Yes.
when it happened, what was your reaction?
Hmm. There's so many reactions that you have when you learn about something like this. I know for me, I kind of said to myself, I wonder what made this one different than all the ones that had come before George Floyd. And yes, there has been, an uprising of people using their voices to create change. But I think that, with the situation with George Floyd, although you're always going to have someone who's going to offer the reasons why in support of the oppressor, um, but when you look at the video or you hear the story, to know that someone's neck was knelt on for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, I don't know how the majority of people
Hmm.
could say that that was okay.
Hmm.
It's just, it's devastating. And I mean, I know that there are some who will say, well, maybe he was under the influence or he did XYZ or wrote a bad check, whatever it was. If you peel away all of those layers and you just look at it from a human perspective, and that's what I think people really need to pay attention to. Yes, this is not okay for a Black man, especially, but it's not okay on a human level,
Hmm.
period. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's I think one of the things in terms of one of the things that I think that makes this situation different is that a lot of people are able to substitute out George Floyd and substitute in another loved one and say, this isn't how we want people to be treated. When you've got a human being who's screaming, I can't breathe, and screaming for his
Yes.
mother, and
Yeah. Well, yeah.
we saw the recent video, or not recent, but the video with Elijah McClain, I believe his name is,
Yes.
in terms of just begging for his life. I mean, this isn't how
Yes.
people should be treated. So I think
That's
we've
right.
gotten to a point where people are just really at the point of saying enough is enough, because
Yes.
this is the first time that we're seeing companies are taking a stance, and
That's right.
you're seeing, like, again, it isn't just the fact that you're seeing these protests globally, but you're also seeing a lot of companies that are coming out and making statements in support as well.
And I think they have to.
Hmm.
I think this is the time where people are going to know, before I buy from you, what do you stand for?
Yeah.
You know, and maybe that wasn't necessarily a thought for the majority before, but I think a lot of people are paying closer attention to the values of the people who run these large companies, who we tend to give our money to. You know, these are the things that we have to be paying attention to, for sure.
Yeah. Now,
Hmm.
so I started this series as an opportunity to have discussion. And I started off with first episode talking about some of my experiences. And then since then,
Hmm.
I've had multiple people on with multiple backgrounds talking about some of the experiences that they've gone through and some of the observations that they might have seen in regards to racism.
Hmm.
One of the things, again, I think that's really sparked from this George Floyd situation is that it's it's made it, I don't want to say okay, but it's opened up the dialogue, whereas a lot of people are saying now, okay, well, I didn't realize that people were going through that. And there's a bit of the you don't know what you don't know. And I'll say that because several years ago, when Me Too and Time's Up came to the forefront, there were a lot of
Hmm.
men who were not aware of the fact that there was that type of behavior was just so rampant, and that
Yes.
it'd be very difficult to find a female friend that didn't go through that.
Right.
So one of the great lyricists of our time, Heavy D, has one of his songs saying,
Yeah.
it's hard to be black, but it's hell to be a black lady." So
Mm.
I'd be very interested in hearing about some of the different experiences that you've gone through yourself.
Yeah. You know, it's really interesting because I think that I have a number of different perspectives to share. So, my mother is white and my father is black. I grew up in a really multicultural community in Nova Scotia where people went from your typical looking white person all the way down to someone who has very dark skin, and everything in between, you know, the freckles, the red hair, the I'm not sure what this person is, but it was never really too much of a thing. um, yes, of course, you know, I think there's racism everywhere, but for the most part I grew up in a community where everyone was accepted. um, and then I moved to Ottawa when I was 11. My parents had divorced, and this is where my mom is from. And so I reconnected more closely with my mom's side of the family, so the white side of the family. And I have a cousin who is very close in age. So as soon as I got here, her and I were like stuck together like glue. But we had to explain time and time and time again, but how are you cousins? I don't get it. You know, I would constantly get questions about my mom. If she was my real mom, is it your mom? And I'm like, I don't know what that means. I mean, this is my mother. So for the most part, I would say the majority of my experiences have been around having to justify or explain my identity to people who don't get it, or they want to classify me in a specific box. Um, but I think also, you know, there's also the piece of sometimes in our own culture and community, you have people who judge you for the way I look. So, for example, someone might say, well, you know, she's light skinned girls, they have attitude, or they think that they're better than anybody else. And I mean, that part of it often comes from our own Black community. And it's so unfortunate, you know, that we struggle sometimes with having to love all different shades of who we are, regardless of that. But I think also, you know, in the workplace, I have been most of the time the only or one of very few Black employees. And so I sat on a panel a few weeks ago, and we were talking about different experiences. And I talked about the importance of representation and how much it matters to have people of color and of different religions and backgrounds and different types of experience in your workplace. Because little things can happen, and sometimes people don't even understand that they're doing what they're doing. So, for example, the social committee at a previous workplace, they put together, oh, let's have fun and guess who the baby picture is of the current staff. All staff are supposed to bring in a baby picture. Well, when you're the only Black person there, where does that leave me, right? So do I participate? Do I not? Do I print off pictures of other random Black babies so that maybe they can guess? But, I don't think things like this are done intentionally. I think that it's just, sometimes so completely over our heads that it's one of those things, like, if it doesn't really affect you intimately, that it's just not present. It's not at the forefront of your thought. So it can be tough. And I think especially when you look at it from a workplace perspective, you have even more of an uncomfortable feeling about how do I address it? Because, I've been told in meetings, outside of the meeting, that my facial expressions, are too much.
What does that mean?
Good question. Because I'm not sure either, completely, to be honest.
I'm sorry, I've heard a lot of things before. I've never heard that your facial expression is too much.
Yeah.
Like, not necessarily specific to you, but just to anybody. I've never heard of somebody coming out of a meeting and saying, your facial expression was like, what, did they give you any sort of context?
I know. So it's kind of difficult to wrap your head around, but
yeah.
I can tell you the way I interpret it.
Yeah.
So if I'm sitting around the table, I'm part of management, we're working together, we're sharing ideas, we're kind of going back and forth. For some reason, I always felt like my tone, my face, my expression was received as more aggressive than someone who didn't look like me. Oh. I think that, and that's something that kind of needs to be unpacked too, is that people have an idea of who a Black person is based on simply what they look like, whether it be a Black woman, a Black man, that for some reason I seemed to intimidate some people along the way. And I wonder, would they have had that same experience with someone who looked different than me? Yeah.
And that's a valid question, because I find with many different races, there are different prejudgments that people have, and there are things that there's certain baggage that they bring to the table that they then want to incorporate on you in terms of, and that from a work perspective, that can definitely go into limitations as well. So there's definitely challenges. There's definitely challenges there. One of the things that's come up, and I'm sure you've seen this on the wonderful thing that is social networking as well, is there's this idea that racism doesn't really exist here in Canada. It's more of a U.S. thing. I don't agree with that. I think it's on different levels. I think it's on much different levels. I mean, obviously, you're dealing with a significantly larger population in the States, and you're also dealing with there's some the difference. Not always, because George Floyd was killed in a blue state, but the differences between blue and red states at times can be very, very severe. What do you think of this whole mentality that racism doesn't really exist in Canada?
I think maybe it doesn't exist to people who are not affected by it. But also it has to do with the history that we've been taught. If you take the time to learn yourself and you understand, Canada Day, for example, big celebration, woo, Canada's birthday. But let's dig back. There were people here, the Indigenous peoples of Canada, there were people here before people found Canada and claimed it, right, as their own. And maybe people look at, you know, the difference in the states as a black and white thing, and that's kind of like the majority of the focus there. And although there are disparities, of course, among Black communities here in Canada, I think that the fight for Indigenous rights is one of the major downfalls in Canadian history. And if people look into that and they learn a bit more and they explore the possibility of another perspective other than the one you think you know, then maybe you might understand that when, you know, people have these arguments about, well, it's not Black Lives Matter, it's all lives matter, right? And then people have the same narrative, well, when Black Lives Matter, all lives matter, it's the same as Indigenous lives too. When their lives matter, then all lives will matter, because right now it's clear that they don't. You know, so I don't care where you are. I believe racism and the ideas of people who are above others or better than others, that exists everywhere. That exists everywhere.
No, I would absolutely agree. As you may or may not know, I'm a huge football, aka soccer fan, and the first time I went to England was last year. And as I'm going and I'm scoping out the different places I want to go, I'm very cognizant of the fact that there are places in Europe, England included, where banana peels are thrown at Black players. And I mean, so there's a lot of nonsense that's going on in the States, but the fact that that's something that's happening in 2020 just blows my mind as well. So 100%, I definitely think
Absolutely.
that this is a global issue, and I definitely agree with a couple of points you made. We have completely mistreated our Indigenous community, to the point where, you know, when I like that you did the air quotes, because one of the things we've been talking about is our educational system, and our educational system doesn't really pay tribute to the real history. It's kind of like a modified version, if you will. So so there's absolutely some challenges there. One of the things I've maintained is that two of the greatest sources of racism is our educational system, in terms of it being taught in one perspective that doesn't really talk to the accomplishments of our Indigenous community or people of color. And the fact that, you know, a lot of the things that you learn about the Black community, you're learning on your own, or you're kind of seeing a movie and saying, hey, I didn't know that those women like really, you know, took NASA by the reins, you know. But then also, I think another major source is in the home, in terms of you see young children of all ethnicities getting along in harmony, and then all of a sudden they go home and they're taught those words, or they're taught those phrases, or they're taught those beliefs that they carry with themselves up into the workplace, when they start having those prejudgments that we were talking about.
Well, and you know, the thing with that is that the conversation really has to shift. It has to move away from, and my children are older, but for those who have younger children during these times, they have told me that they have to shift the conversation from we all have differences to we all have differences, and sometimes those who are different than others are treated poorly. And I think that sometimes in the education system, you know, we're worried about protecting the children and what they learn and how they're going to perceive the information that they're receiving. But the reality is it's out there. And especially these generations, you know, today and tomorrow, are going to find ways to learn about the information, whether you tell them or not. And I think that also sometimes parents, you know, if it's not in the home, that they feel like, well, you know, maybe it's not really my responsibility, or it's not even a conversation that they have inside their own mind, right? It just might not be there. For me, it was a conversation that was always had, because my mom was white and my dad was Black. So we always had that talk, and it was put in my face. And then for my children, you know, I started off talking to them at a very early age about differences and the importance of accepting and loving people regardless of who they love, right? what religion they practice. At the end of the day, instead of people focusing so much on putting a name or a title on it, if you focus on the values and the beliefs of that person, I bet you we're probably all in line, so focusing on that instead of focusing so much on what makes us different. I'll just say it because I'm remembering right now, I had a conversation with a friend of mine just before the morning of the march here in Ottawa. And, she was telling me, of course, that she supported the idea of participating in the march, and that, she's always told her kids that we don't see color. And so I think that's another big lesson that people are having to unlearn. So we had the conversation where I said to her, can I offer you another perspective? I want you to see my color because my color is part of my identity. It makes up who I am.
Yeah.
Right? I want you to see me. I don't want you to treat me any differently, but I want you to recognize that I am a proud Black woman and that I may have experienced things differently than you have and have not necessarily been afforded the things that you have because through no fault of your own, you were born white. That's just the reality.
Now, I'm going to set up my next question by kind of breaking my heart. Just before I hit record, you had said you had not seen any of this series yet. You have not watched any of these episodes. That's correct, right?
Right. Yes.
I don't know what you've been doing with your time, but please go back and watch them. Especially
I
now.
Promise. I will, of course.
Especially now that you're involved in it.
Absolutely.
I don't want somebody coming up to you with a DVD copy of this series and you signing it if you haven't watched the others.
Okay. Very true.
Okay, so in the first episode, again, I dealt with my own experiences and I want to lay out a scenario with you and I wanted to get your opinion on it. Okay. So I'm going to personalize this to you. So going back to a work situation, and again, you and I were, so many similarities, one of which being that we've been in office environments where we've been the only, Black person in the office. Okay.
Yeah.
So you're in the office, somebody comes up to you and says, Clarissa, I don't know what I should call you. And I'm hoping you can help me. Are you African American? But we're in Canada, so are you African Canadian, or should I call you Black, or should I call you Negro? What should I call you? What is your answer to that question?
You know what? That is well, first of all, I think we need to let go of all Black people are African American.
But what do I call you?
For me, you call me Clarissa.
Okay, so I'm going to stop you right there because in my scenario, that's 100% what I said. Call me Keith. Now, since then, and I've welcomed conversation and I've welcomed questions on this. I've had a few people that have come to me and private messaged me and said, looking at it from her perspective, I think that's kind of a valid question, Keith, because what do they call you? So I wanted to have like a quick conversation with you about that. My mentality is that we're in the situation where we're putting everybody in like these boxes and these containers. And it's like, okay, this is my Black friend, this is my gay friend, and all of this stuff. And I don't think that's necessary. I think it's Clarissa, I'm Keith, like end of story. And I just wanted to get your thought process on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, I understand that this person probably wants to be respectful, wants to honor, right?
Yeah.
What I want to be called. But I would also challenge them and ask them, why is that important to you? And I don't know, I think it kind of has a few different points to it. It depends on the context for me. So if you, I would more want to know, why is it you're trying to find out if you need to call me Afro-Canadian, African Nova Scotian, Black, my father's roots are from Barbados. Do you call me Bayesian? I mean, I don't know if it matters per se, and it's a tough question because I do think that some people are very genuine, but I have a girlfriend, and she was approached in a grocery store like 2 weeks ago where someone was like, where are you from? And
Yeah.
I don't, why does that matter?
It's interesting. So on the first part, I believe, again, I don't think that um, that we need to label people in boxes, because if we flip the script, I don't think our white friends are saying, "Oh, I'm getting together with my blonde-haired friend today. I'm getting together with my redheaded friend today." It sounds silly, right? But for me, it's similar in terms of, yeah, like if I aired that video and I did have some questions, but I also had a colleague who reached out to me and said, it's interesting you made the point, because there have been times where somebody says, "Oh, you work with Keith," and they're trying to do everything they can not to say that black guy, but
Yeah.
they want to. Here's how I approach it. So
Yeah.
I am fascinated by people. I mean, this series is an example of that. I'm interested in people and having conversations. Anytime I come across somebody who has, for example, an interesting accent, or there's something about their culture
Mm-hmm.
that I find interesting, the way that I've always approached it is, I'm actually very curious. What's your background? I'm Trini. What's yours? And kind of
Mm.
opening it up. So saying, this is my background, as opposed to making it what can be somewhat confrontational. Because if somebody just
Yes.
willy-nilly comes out of nowhere and is like, "Where are you from?" Probably not the best way to approach it. Just saying.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you know what? I will have to say that a number of white people probably at this point feel like, I don't know what to say,
Mhm.
right? I don't want to say the wrong thing. I don't want to come off as disrespectful. I want to be able to identify you in a way that's comfortable for you. Again,
Yeah.
I think it just has to do with the context. And I understand it's a slippery slope. Sometimes it's not all that easy, but at the same time, think about maybe the person on the other side who's getting asked the question, and how they may be feeling uncomfortable with, how do I best answer this to make sure that this person understands what I mean, what I'm trying to say. I
Exactly.
mean, I 100% wholeheartedly believe we have to continue to keep the conversation going about the importance of Black Lives Matter and why.
Mhm.
Um, but I also think there has to be some room there, some forgiveness, and some space to understand that there are going to be times where people don't necessarily understand or don't get it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. And I am blown away by the, not just in within my own, like my own circle and what I've seen, but just globally, like the level of support and
Hmm.
the level of people who are coming out and saying that they want to be allies and what can they do to
Yes,
help and things of that nature. And I think that's how change happens. You
that's
know,
right.
change
Yes.
isn't. Sorry, I was going to
Sorry.
say that no, it's all good. I was going to say that by having conversations, as uncomfortable as they may be at times,
Yes,
I think that's important, in putting it on the table and just recognizing, okay, first there is an issue, and then second
that's
of all,
right.
how do we move past it?
And that's where growth comes from, right? You have to be vulnerable. You have to be uncomfortable. Um, I think beautiful things, anyway, most of the time don't come strictly from a straight line.
Mhm.
I have received several phone calls that started off with, I first want to let you know that I'm thinking about you. I also want to let you know that if there's anything that I say that I do, I need you to check me on it.
Mhm.
And I want to have that conversation. I think that is one of the most beautiful things that anyone can say. So instead of, coming out of the blue and asking me, where am I from or what do I want to be called? Maybe start off by saying that.
Mhm.
And by getting to know me on a more personal level, right? Or getting to know the things that I like, or whatnot, then you'll learn based on getting to know me a little bit better. So often people are so stuck in, the little circle of who they know, what they're used to. And sometimes, you have to step out of the box. I will say, even for myself, coming from um, Nova Scotia and then coming here and in my teenage years, going to Caribbean restaurants, I was scared. What if I don't understand what they're saying to me? Right? What if
Yeah.
I ask to order something and they're like, what did you say? And that's my own community, my own culture, right? But I've had to find ways to be okay with asking the questions or saying like, I don't know. It's not something I grew up with. So this is something new for me. And being okay with that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Excellent. One of the last things I want to ask you, and we've kind of touched on it, but I'll give you an opportunity to expand on it. When we look at all of these fantastic allies that are putting their hands up and saying, "What can I do to help?" and what do you need from us, and things of that nature. I know there's not one simple answer, but what are some of the things that you would say to them?
Yeah. I think first and foremost, I would say take down the wall and don't worry about how this is going to affect you or feeling like you have to defend, right, your position. Um, and because that can end up being met with resistance, right?
Hmm.
So one of the things that I would like to say to people is that if I tell you I'm insulted, whether that's what you meant or not, I need you to believe me and I need you to accept that,
Hmm.
right? Because the reality is, and I mean, that's like communication 101, regardless of when you throw race into it. Um, but sometimes what I say is not what you will receive. But one of the other most important things is just being comfortable with speaking up and saying, I'm not okay with that. Um, One of the things that recently impacted me the most was a conversation that I had with someone on Facebook. This was still while the businesses were shut down and the march had happened. And this person was, saying that they couldn't go to work and open their business, yet people could march. And I wanted to address it, but then I'm saying to myself, like, I'm tired. I'm kind of exhausted. At the same time, I have to ask myself, do I want to take this one on? But it was important for me to speak up, and to, again, offer another perspective of saying, I understand that your business is important and you have put so much work into it. But the reality is the systems are in place for you to be okay. And this situation that we're dealing with right now digs a lot deeper than business owners and kids' graduation. We're
Yeah.
dealing with people losing their lives. And so from that, I actually decided to make a business called Created by Clarissa, where I have decided to use black onyx jewelry.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and actually, I don't know if you can see it here, but on the emblem, it says, I'm not okay.
Okay.
And I want this to be not only a conversation starter, but something that can continue the conversation. I want someone to ask me, what is it you're not okay about? What is it you're not okay with? So that I can let them know I'm not okay with oppression, with racism, with discrimination, right? And we can have a conversation, because that's what needs to happen. We need to keep talking, not just, people are posting on social media. I think that's great, but I need everyone to do one step more. Don't just talk about it on social media, address it in public.
Hmm.
Talk to people face to face, join anti-racism groups, find out how you can help. What are the businesses that are in your community? How can you support the Black dollar?
Hmm.
That's important. And I hope that people are being more mindful, like I mentioned in the beginning of our conversation, about really choosing to support businesses that are in line with your values.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Don't just talk and post things and repost things, but taking action,
that's
100%.
right. Yeah.
100%. Well, listen, I'm so appreciative of your time today, and I'm
Absolutely.
glad that we were able to have this chat. It means a lot.
Really happy
And
to.
yeah, and thanks so much for sharing your perspectives and your opinions. And I think it's great for people to hear, and we're going to keep these conversations going, and you're going to catch
Thank
up
you
on this
so
amazing
much.
series. Um,
Absolutely. And I promise I'm going to share it across my platforms too, because I love to spread the word. And like I said, I think you're doing a great job by providing a platform for people to continue talking about this.
yeah, I remember at one point I was just like a lot of us going through so many different emotions of anger and numb and everything, and it's just like I need to do something. And
Yes.
I thought one of the things I could do was just have an opportunity of having these conversations. And one of the great things that's coming out of this is people coming forward and telling me about their own different experiences, like we're doing on
Mm-hmm.
these. But some of the I guess I'll say the private chats where people are either addressing like, Keith, I hope I didn't offend you when I did this, or
Yeah.
or hey Keith, this is a situation I'm dealing with in my family and I need some help with it. So I appreciate that that this is an avenue for dialogue. So
That's right.
um,
It doesn't have to be one-sided,
yeah,
right?
no,
I
not at all.
mean, the more we talk about it, the more we're able to hear your perspective, hear mine, maybe explore someone else's.
Yeah.
So when people know that they have someone that they can talk to, right? Because one of the things that has happened over the number of years is that we've almost been disconnected, even though we seem more connected online.
Mhm.
And I hope that this is an opportunity for people to be able to look each other in the eye, to hear each other's voice, and to be able to say, I
Yeah.
need some help.
We used to take things and shove them under the carpet, but we've just walked into the room and it's all hardwood floor. There's no carpet, so it's good.
That's right.
Yeah. All right. I'm gonna let you get back to your day. Thanks
Perfect.
again so much for checking
Thank
this
you
out,
so much, Keith.
and hope to chat with you soon. Okay.
Okay, sounds
Okay.
good.
Okay.